Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of WCW's Beach Blast 1993. Starting off the evening, we go to our first match of the night. It is for the WCW Television Championship. It is Paul Orndorff versus Ron Simmons. I thought this was a good match to start Beach Blast 1993. Back and forth matchup between Orndorff and Simmons, with Simmons keeping the pace of the match. Orndorff then hits a knee drop on Simmons in the middle of the ring. Simmons and Orndorff both exchange in the middle of the ring, with Simmons hitting a devastating power slam on Orndorff for a near fall. Orndorff then goes for a pile driver, but Simmons counters it into a backdrop, sending Orndorff over the ropes to the outside. Referee ends up seeing this, and your winner of the match due to disqualification is Paul Orndorff. Paul Orndorff ends up retaining the WCW Television Championship at that time. So hats off to Paul Orndorff for getting the win in that match, and at that time retaining the WCW Television Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It's a tag team matchup. It is Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Bagwell versus Tex Slazenger and Shanghai Pierce. The match itself, it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Too Cold Scorpio and Bagwell keeping the pace of the match. Too Cold ends up hitting a splash off the top rope, and then Too Cold ultimately hits his signature 450 splash, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Bagwell. Hats off to Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Bagwell for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Eric Watts versus Steven Regal. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between Watts and Regal, with Regal keeping the pace of the match. Regal lands multiple European uppercuts on Watts in the middle of the ring. Watts ends up applying the STF on Regal, but Regal breaks the hold. And Regal ultimately hits a roll-up on Eric Watts, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Steven Regal. Hats off to Steven Regal for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Max Payne versus Johnny B. Bad. I thought this was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between Payne and Johnny B. Bad, with Johnny B. Bad keeping the pace of the match. Johnny B. Bad ultimately hits a crossbody on Max Payne, pins him for the 3, and your winner of the match is Johnny B. Bad. A couple things I want to say about this matchup quickly, man. Number one, it was an okay match, but I've stated this multiple times in the past. Max Payne, I don't know who came up with that character in WCW, but the guy was awful. There was no in-ring charisma with the guy. The guy cannot wrestle. He literally came out to the ring dressed like one of the Nasty Boys with a guitar. That was it. The guy can't wrestle. I don't know why they were pushing, Max Payne back in the day. He just couldn't wrestle, man. He was like a knockoff between one of the Nasty Boys and maybe One Man Gang, but couldn't wrestle like one of the Nasty Boys or One Man Gang. I don't know why he was there. It was just a waste of talent, to be honest with you, man. And again, I don't know why they ended up signing Max Payne to a WCW contract back in the day, but it was just awful. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the WCW Tag Team Championships. It is Arn Anderson and Paul Roma versus the Hollywood Blondes. I thought this was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with the Hollywood Blondes keeping the pace of the match. Arn ends up hitting a DDT on Pillman in the middle of the ring, but Austin ultimately hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match, and at that time, still, WCW Tag Team Champions, are the Hollywood Blondes. The other thing I'm going to say about this matchup, too, kind of relates to what I just said about Max Payne, is Paul Roma. I'm a big fan of the Four Horsemen, and I stated this the other day. The Four Horsemen are one of the best stables in all professional wrestling. With the likes of Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and Barry Windham. Fantastic stable. And then, later on in the years when the Horsemen wanted to, reinvent themselves and add new people, I don't know what the mindset was of them signing Paul Roma to the Four Horsemen. It was not needed. And Paul Roma, even Arn Anderson kind of said the same thing years ago, that, Paul Roma probably wasn't the best choice as far as being a Four Horseman. He was probably one of the worst Four Horsemen selections they ever selected to join the Four Horsemen. And honestly, I would put McMichael over Paul Roma immensely as a Four Horseman. Paul Roma was just, I don't know why he got into the Four Horsemen. I don't know what the hell they were thinking with that, but by far one of the worst decisions the Four Horsemen have ever made in their entire existence. So, but hats off to the Hollywood Blondes for getting the win in that matchup and retaining, at that time, the WCW Tag Team Championships. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a 30-minute Iron Man match for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. It is Rick Rude versus Dustin Rhodes. I thought this was a good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between Rude and Rhodes, with Rude keeping the pace of the match. Rude ends up hitting a Rude Awakening on Rhodes, pins him for the 3. Rude wins the first fall. Dustin then ultimately hits a tombstone on Rude for a near fall. Rhodes then hits his signature Bulldog on Rick Rude, pins him for the 3. And Rhodes gets another fall. Both are tied up 1-1 as far as pinfalls are concerned. But this match ultimately ends in a draw. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. It is Ric Flair versus Barry Windham. I thought this was a great match. Back and forth matchup between Flair and Windham, with Flair landing devastating chops on Windham in the corner. Windham then hits a power slam on Flair for a near fall. Flair gets up, then hits a knee drop on Windham in the middle of the ring. Windham then gets up, hits a superplex off the top rope on Flair. But Flair ultimately applies his signature figure 4. Windham's shoulders were pinned to the mat. Referee counts 3. And your winner of the match by pinfall and new NWA World Heavyweight Champion at that time is the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Hats off to the Nature Boy Ric Flair for getting the win in that match, and at that time becoming the new NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event of Beach Blast 1993. It is a tag team matchup. It is Vader teaming up with Sid Vicious versus the British Bulldog and Sting. I thought this was a good matchup as well. Back and forth matchup between both teams, with Sid hitting a devastating chokeslam on Sting. Vader and Sid were keeping the pace of the match. Vader hits a moonsault off the top rope on the British Bulldog. Vader goes for the cover, but Sting breaks the hold. Bulldog then gets up, hits a roll-up, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match are the British Bulldog and Sting. Couple of things I'm going to say about WCW's Beach Blast 1993. Like I stated multiple times in the past, man, this wasn't a bad event. It wasn't the best, but it definitely wasn't a bad event. There was a couple of matches on here that I was really interested in. Paul Orndorff versus Ron Simmons for the television championship. You know, I wish we would have got a clear-cut winner in that matchup and not just a disqualification. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't have been mad if Ron Simmons got the win over Paul Orndorff to become the WCW television champion. But unfortunately, the match ended in disqualification due to the fact that Ron Simmons ended up countering the pile driver, sending Paul Orndorff over the ropes to the outside. And back in the day in WCW, if you threw somebody over the ropes, it was an automatic disqualification. I wasn't a big fan of the rule, but that was the rule back in the day. And unfortunately, with that backdrop to the outside on Orndorff, it caused disqualification and Orndorff to retain the television championship. The other match that that wasn't that bad either was the Too Cold Scorpio and Bagwell versus Tex and Shanghai. It was a decent match, man. And to be honest with you, Too Cold Scorpio was severely underrated, in my honest opinion. As far as a high flyer, you got to put him up there. You know, the 450 splash, I feel like Too Cold Scorpio kind of made that move world famous. Now, I know there's other guys that have done that move that are still doing it, today, like Ricochet and stuff like that. But I feel like Too Cold Scorpio really put the 450 splash on the map. And even guys like, Hayabusa from FMW back in the day, who's a legendary performer, rest in peace to Hayabusa, who made that move very famous. But I feel like Too Cold Scorpio was severely underrated. Now, it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with Marcus Bagwell. Now, credit, his singles run was awful. Awful. Horrendous. But when he was teaming up with Too Cold Scorpio, they were a really solid tag team, man. They really were. And honestly, very surprised that they weren't, multi-time tag team champions, in my honest opinion. I know some people, that might be a hot take for most people. But they were a great tag team. They really were. In my honest opinion, man, they were, great tag team. They kind of gelled in the ring perfectly together, especially with Too Cold Scorpio being the high flyer and Marcus Bagwell not being the high flyer, more of a mat wrestler. But, we'll throw some drop kicks in here and there and stuff like that. I just thought they would have been multi-time tag team champions. Eric Watts versus Steven Regal. It was a decent match. It was always great to see William Regal in the ring wrestling. I think William Regal was another wrestler that was severely underrated. And even after that match, he ended up calling out Paul Orndorff, who was the television champion at that time. And, Steven Regal, William Regal, whatever you guys want to call him, he had a fantastic in-ring career, in my honest opinion. Dustin Rhodes and Rick Rude in the Iron Man 30-minute match for the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship. Phenomenal matchup. I wish we got a clear-cut winner in that match, but unfortunately the match ended in a draw. So, again, it would have been cool to see a clear-cut winner in that match. Ric Flair versus Barry Windham for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Great match. And pretty much this match was pretty much set up as Ric Flair's return match. And it was just a phenomenal match. See, Flair and Windham have a match. Two guys that obviously know each other very well. Windham being a part of the Four Horsemen as well as Ric Flair. So to see those guys have a match together for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, phenomenal matchup. And then the main event, Vader teaming up with Sid Vicious against British Bulldog and Sting. Phenomenal matchup. Great tag team match. And it was a great main event for the fans, man. So as far as a rating for Beach Blast 1993, man, I'm going to give it a solid 5, 5.5 at best. Like I said, was it the best WCW event of all time? No. But was it the worst? No. So I'm going to have to give WCW Beach Blast 1993 a solid 5.5 at best. But this is my review of WCW's Beach Blast 1993. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful. And remember, stay classic. Peace.